I never thought I'd be the kind of person who could be bought. But when my boss offered me $10,000 to befriend her daughter, I said yes. What I didn't expect was to fall in love with her. And what I definitely didn't expect was for her to find out the truth. It started on a Tuesday morning. I've always believed that every person has a price. Not in a cynical way, but in a practical one. We all make compromises, trade pieces of ourselves for security, comfort, or survival. I just never imagined mine would be $10,000 and a broken heart. The fluorescent lights in the office hummed their usual monotonous tune that Tuesday morning. I was 3 hours deep into a presentation for a client who wanted to sell organic dog food, like it was a luxury sports car, when I heard the click of heels approaching my cubicle. Expensive heels. The kind that announced their wearer's importance before they even spoke. Holly. I looked up to find Evelyn Clark standing at the entrance of my tiny workspace, her perfectly tailored navy suit making my clearance rack blouse feel even cheaper than it was. In the 2 years I'd worked at Sterling & Associates, my boss had never once visited my cubicle. People were summoned to her office, not the other way around. Mrs. Clark. I straightened immediately, my heart already picking up speed. My office. Now. Her voice was calm, but there was something underneath it. Something that sounded almost like desperation, though I couldn't imagine Evelyn Clark desperate for anything. I followed her through the maze of cubicles, feeling the curious stares of my co-workers burning into my back. The walk to her corner office felt longer than usual, each step heavy with dread. Was I being fired? Had I screwed up the Peterson account? My mind raced through every possible mistake I could have made. Her office was exactly what you'd expect from a woman who'd built a multi-million-dollar advertising firm from nothing. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, minimalist furniture that probably cost more than my car, and walls decorated with awards that gleamed in the afternoon light. She closed the door behind us with a soft click that somehow felt final. "Sit," she said, but she remained standing, her fingers drumming against her desk in an uncharacteristic display of nervousness. I sat, my hands clasped in my lap to keep them from shaking. For a long moment, she just looked at me, really looked at me, as if she were trying to see past my carefully constructed professional facade. When she finally spoke, her voice was quieter than I'd ever heard it. "I need to ask you something personal, Holly. And before you answer, I want you to know that I'm aware of how inappropriate this is. I'm aware that it crosses every professional boundary we have. But I'm also desperate, and desperate people do desperate things." My throat went dry. "Okay." She took a breath, and for the first time since I'd known her, Evelyn Clark looked vulnerable. "I have a daughter, Grace. She's 26, brilliant, and completely lost. About a year ago, something happened. I don't know what, she won't tell me, but it broke something inside her." Her voice cracked slightly. "She doesn't leave the house anymore. She's dropped out of her graduate program. She won't see her old friends. She barely speaks to me. I've tried everything, therapists, medication, pleading, threatening, but nothing works. She's drowning, Holly, and I can't reach her." I didn't know what to say. I'd never heard Evelyn speak about her personal life. I hadn't even known she had a daughter. "I've been watching you," she continued, pacing now. "The way you interact with people, the way you make them feel seen. You have this quality, this warmth that draws people in. And I thought maybe, just maybe, if someone new entered Grace's life, someone she doesn't associate with all her pain, someone who could just be there without the weight of history, maybe she'd let them in." Understanding crashed over me like cold water. "You want me to befriend your daughter?" "Yes." She turned to face me fully. "I want to hire you to spend time with her. Take her out, talk to her. Help her remember what it feels like to be alive. I don't expect you to fix her. I know you're not a therapist. I just want you to be her friend." The word hire hung between us, heavy and uncomfortable. "Mrs. Clark, I don't think." $10,000. The number stopped me mid-sentence. $10,000. That was 3 months of rent. That was my student loans. That was the breathing room I hadn't had since I graduated college and discovered that an advertising degree didn't guarantee anything except debt. "I know it sounds insane," Evelyn said quickly. I know this is something people should do out of kindness, not for money. But I also know you've been picking up every overtime shift available. I know you're drowning in bills. I'm not trying to manipulate you, Holly. I'm just being honest about what I can offer and what I need in return. I stared at my hands, my mind spinning. This was wrong, wasn't it? Being paid to pretend to be someone's friend felt like something out of a movie about terrible people making terrible choices. But then again, wasn't all of advertising just getting paid to make people believe things? And I needed the money. God, I needed the money. What if she finds out? I asked quietly. Evelyn's jaw tightened. She can't. It would destroy whatever progress you might make. So you want me to lie to her? I want you to help her. Evelyn's eyes were fierce now. However you can. And yes, that means not telling her about our arrangement. Is it ideal? No. But nothing about this situation is ideal, Holly. My daughter is disappearing, and I'm running out of options. I should have said no. Every instinct I had told me this would end badly. But I thought about my bank account, hovering dangerously close to zero. I thought about the collection agency calls I'd been ignoring. I thought about how tired I was of barely surviving. How would this even work? I heard myself ask. Relief flooded Evelyn's face. I'll give you her address. You'll introduce yourself however you want. Maybe say you're new to the neighborhood, that you work with me and thought you'd stop by. Feel it out. See if she'll talk to you. I'll transfer half the money up front, half when. She paused. When I see improvement. And if she doesn't want to spend time with me, then you'll have $5,000 for trying. Evelyn pulled out her phone. But I don't think that will happen. Like I said, I've been watching you. You're good with people, Holly. You make them feel comfortable. That's why I chose you. The word chose sent a shiver down my spine. How long had she been planning this? I need to think about it, I said, even though part of me already knew what I would decide. Evelyn nodded. Take the rest of the day. But Holly, she looked at me with an intensity that made me want to look away. My daughter is the most important thing in my world. If you do this, you have to actually try. I'm not paying you to go through the motions. I'm paying you to care. I understand. But as I left her office and returned to my cubicle, I wasn't sure I understood anything at all. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I went through the motions of work, responding to emails and pretending to focus on presentations. But my mind was elsewhere. By the time I got home to my tiny studio apartment, I'd almost convinced myself to say no. Almost. I looked around at my life. The mattress on the floor because I couldn't afford a bed frame, the empty refrigerator, the stack of bills on my counter that I'd been too afraid to open. When had everything become so hard? When had I become the kind of person who was one emergency away from complete disaster? My phone buzzed. A text from Evelyn. I know it's a difficult decision. Whatever you choose, I respect it. But please know that this could change her life. And maybe yours too. I stared at that message for a long time. Then I typed back, I'll do it. Her response came immediately. Thank you. I'll send you the details tomorrow. I set my phone down and stared at the ceiling, wondering what I'd just agreed to. Wondering if I'd just made the biggest mistake of my life. Saturday afternoon, I stood outside a beautiful brownstone in one of the city's nicest neighborhoods, my heart hammering against my ribs. I'd changed my outfit 4 times before settling on jeans and a casual sweater, something that said friendly and approachable, without trying too hard. The address Evelyn had given me wasn't the family home, but a separate residence she'd apparently set up for Grace. She needed her own space. Evelyn had explained during our brief meeting yesterday when she'd transferred the first $5,000 into my account. Somewhere she could be alone without feeling like I'm watching her every move. I raised my hand to knock, then hesitated. I could still walk away. I could transfer the money back and pretend this never happened. But then the door opened, and I found myself face to face with Grace Clark. She was beautiful in a way that caught me off guard. Not the polished, intimidating beauty of her mother, but something softer, sadder. Dark brown hair pulled into a messy bun, oversized gray sweatshirt hanging off one shoulder, and eyes that looked like they held 1,000 untold stories. But it was the exhaustion in those eyes that struck me most. The kind of tired that sleep couldn't fix. Can I help you? Her voice was hoarse, like she hadn't used it much lately. "Hi," I said, trying to sound casual despite my racing heart. "I'm Holly. I work with your mom at Sterling and Associates. I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd introduce myself. She mentioned you lived around here." Grace's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind her eyes. Suspicion, maybe. Or just exhaustion at having to deal with another person. "That's weird," she said flatly. "My mom doesn't usually send her employees to check on me. She prefers to do that herself, repeatedly." I felt my cheeks heat. She didn't send me, exactly. I've been in the city for a year now and haven't really made many friends outside of work. And your mom mentioned you liked books and coffee, and so do I, so I thought. I trailed off, letting the lie hang between us. She studied me for a long moment, and I forced myself not to look away. Finally, she sighed. "Look, I appreciate whatever this is, but I'm not really in the market for new friends right now. No offense." "None taken," I said quickly. "But maybe just coffee? One time. If you hate it, I'll never bother you again. I promise." I don't know what made me push. Maybe it was the $5,000 already in my account. Maybe it was the image of Evelyn's desperate face. Or maybe it was something in Grace's eyes that made me want to stay, want to know what had put that sadness there. Grace looked at me like I was a puzzle she couldn't quite figure out. Then, surprisingly, she stepped back from the door. "Fine. One coffee. But I'm not putting on real pants for this." I couldn't help but smile. Sweatpants are perfectly acceptable coffee attire. Good. Because these are the only pants I own anymore. It was said like a joke, but something in her tone suggested it might actually be true. 20 minutes later, we sat across from each other in a small cafe downtown, the kind with mismatched furniture and local art on the walls. Grace had indeed kept her sweatpants on, pairing them with an oversized denim jacket that might have been stylish, or might have just been the first thing she grabbed. I couldn't tell. She ordered an iced coffee despite the autumn chill, and I got a cappuccino I didn't really want. The silence between us was heavy, awkward in a way that made me second-guess everything. "So, I started. Your mom says you studied literature?" Grace's expression hardened slightly. "My mom talks about me a lot, apparently." "Not really," I backtracked quickly. "Just mentioned it once. I think she's proud of you. Proud of who I used to be, maybe." Grace stirred her coffee mechanically. "Not who I am now." There was so much pain in those words that I felt it in my chest. "And who are you now?" She looked up at me, really looked at me for the first time. "I don't know. That's the problem." The honesty in her answer surprised me. I'd expected walls, defensiveness, maybe hostility. But there was just weariness. Like she was too tired to pretend anymore. "I think that's okay," I said softly. "Not knowing. I don't think any of us really know who we are. We're just making it up as we go." A ghost of a smile crossed her face. "That's either very wise or very depressing. Can it be both?" This time, she actually smiled. It was small, fleeting, but real. And something inside my chest loosened. We talked for another hour, carefully navigating around anything too personal. She told me about the books she'd been reading, mostly depressing literary fiction that seemed to match her mood. I told her about the ridiculous advertising campaigns I worked on, exaggerating the absurdity to make her laugh. And she did laugh, once or twice, short bursts of sound that seemed to surprise her as much as they surprised me. When we finally left the cafe, the sun was starting to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. "Thank you," Grace said as we stood on the sidewalk. "For being normal. Everyone else who tries to talk to me treats me like I'm made of glass. You just talk to me." Guilt twisted in my stomach. "Well, I meant what I said. I really am looking for friends in this city." "Then I guess you can come back," she said, shoving her hands in her pockets. "If you want. No promises that I'll be good company. I'll take my chances." As I walked home that evening, I tried to ignore the weight in my chest. I told myself this was just a job. I was helping someone, getting paid for it, and there was nothing wrong with that. But Grace's sad eyes stayed with me long into the night, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just stepped onto a path I couldn't come back from. I just didn't know yet how right I was. The next 3 weeks passed in a strange rhythm that became almost comfortable. I showed up at Grace's door every few days, sometimes with coffee, sometimes with books I thought she might like, sometimes with nothing but an excuse to get her out of the house. She said no more often than she said yes. Some days, she wouldn't even open the door, just texted me that she couldn't today, maybe tomorrow. Other days, she'd answer in pajamas at 3 in the afternoon, her hair unbrushed and her eyes red-rimmed, and I'd know that whatever demons she was fighting had won that particular battle. But slowly, gradually, she started saying yes more often. We fell into an easy pattern. Coffee shops where we'd sit for hours talking about everything except what was really wrong. Bookstores where she'd run her fingers along spines like she was greeting old friends. Sometimes we'd just walk through the city, her hands shoved in her pockets, her face tilted toward the sky like she was remembering what sunlight felt like. I learned things about her in fragments. She'd been 2 years into a PhD in comparative literature when she'd dropped out. She had a younger brother who lived in Seattle and called her every week, though she rarely answered. She'd once wanted to be a professor, to spend her life surrounded by words and ideas and students who still believed literature could change the world. What happened? I asked one afternoon as we sat on a bench in the park, watching the autumn leaves drift down around us. She was quiet for so long I thought she wouldn't answer. Then, I fell in love with someone who turned out to be someone else entirely. And when it ended, I realized I didn't know how to be a person anymore. Isn't that pathetic? Losing yourself so completely in someone else that when they're gone, you're gone too. My chest ached. That's not pathetic. That's human. It's weak. It's brave, I countered. Loving someone that much. Even if it ends badly. Most people never let themselves feel that deeply, because they're terrified of exactly what you're going through. She looked at me then, really looked at me, and something passed between us. Something I wasn't ready to name. You're different from what I expected, she said softly. What did you expect? Someone my mother sent to fix me. Someone with a checklist and a sympathetic smile and absolutely no idea what it feels like to be this tired of existing. She paused. But you don't treat me like a project. You treat me like a person. Guilt crashed over me so hard I had to look away. If only she knew. If only she knew that I was exactly what she'd expected, just better at hiding it. Grace, I started, but she cut me off. Thank you, Holly. For showing up. For not giving up when I'm terrible company. For just being here. The words I should have said died in my throat. Instead, I just nodded, hating myself a little more with each passing second. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon when everything started to shift. Grace had actually invited me over, which was rare. Usually, I was the one initiating, always careful not to push too hard but consistent enough that she knew I wasn't going anywhere. Her apartment was small but cozy, filled with books stacked on every available surface and plants she was trying desperately to keep alive. We'd ordered takeout and settled on her worn couch to watch a film she'd been wanting to see. Some French movie about loss and memory that felt almost too on the nose. The rain drummed against the windows, creating a cocoon of sound that made the rest of the world feel very far away. Grace was curled into the corner of the couch, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, and I was hyper-aware of every inch of space between us. When the movie ended, we sat in silence as the credits rolled. The main character had spent the entire film trying to outrun her grief, only to realize that the only way through was to feel it all, every terrible, beautiful moment of it. Do you think that's true? Grace asked, her voice barely above a whisper. That the only way out is through? I think it's the only way that doesn't destroy you, I said carefully. She turned to face me, and in the dim light of the apartment, her eyes looked darker, deeper. What are you running from, Holly? The question caught me off guard. What makes you think I'm running from anything? Because you're here, she said simply. Spending all this time with someone you barely know, someone who's barely functional most days. People don't do that unless they're avoiding something in their own life. She was more perceptive than I'd given her credit for. Maybe I just like your company. Maybe, she agreed. But I don't think that's all of it. I should have redirected the conversation. Should have made a joke or changed the subject. Instead, I found myself telling the truth. Or at least part of it. I'm running from the fact that I'm almost 30 and I have nothing to show for it, I admitted. No real career, no savings, no relationship, no plan. I work a job I don't care about to pay rent on an apartment I hate, and most days I wonder if this is all there is. If I'm just going to keep treading water until I drown. Grace didn't look away, didn't offer empty reassurances. She just listened, and somehow that was exactly what I needed. So maybe you're right, I continued. Maybe I am here because it's easier to focus on someone else's problems than my own. Or maybe I'm here because being around you makes me feel less alone. Is that selfish? No, she said softly. It's honest. She shifted closer on the couch, close enough that I could see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes, close enough that I could smell her shampoo, something floral and clean. Holly, she started, then stopped, seeming to gather courage. Can I tell you something? Of course. I think about you a lot. When you're not here, I mean. I catch myself wondering what you're doing, whether you're okay, whether you'll come back. She took a shaky breath. And I know this is probably a terrible idea, considering I'm a mess, and you're just trying to be a good friend. But I think I'm starting to feel something for you. Something more than friendship. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure she could hear it. Every rational thought in my head screamed at me to shut this down, to protect her from the inevitable hurt that would come when she learned the truth. But looking at her, seeing the vulnerability in her eyes, the way she was opening herself up despite every wall she'd built, I couldn't find the words to push her away. Grace, you don't have to say anything, she interrupted quickly. I just needed you to know. I'm tired of hiding how I feel about things. I've spent the last year pretending I don't feel anything at all, and I can't do it anymore. Especially not with you. I feel it too, I whispered, the words escaping before I could stop them. I think about you constantly. You've become the best part of my days. Her eyes widened, hope and fear mingling in her expression. Really? Really? She leaned in slowly, giving me every opportunity to pull away. But I didn't. I couldn't. When her lips met mine, soft and tentative and perfect, I forgot every reason this was wrong. I forgot about the money, about Evelyn, about the lie that had brought me here. There was only Grace, only this moment, only the feeling of finally coming home to a place I'd never been. When we finally pulled apart, she was smiling. Really smiling. It transformed her entire face, made her look younger, lighter. I never thought I'd feel this again, she said, her forehead resting against mine. I thought I was broken beyond repair. The guilt hit me like a physical blow. She thought this was real, thought I'd chosen her freely. But this whole thing was built on a transaction, on money and lies and manipulation. I was the worst kind of person, letting her believe in something that started as nothing more than a job. You're not broken, I managed to say. You're just hurt. There's a difference. She kissed me again, and I let myself get lost in it, pushing away the voice in my head that screamed this was wrong, that I had to tell her the truth. Tomorrow, I promised myself. I'll tell her tomorrow. But tomorrow came and went, and I said nothing. The next 2 weeks were the best and worst of my life. Grace and I fell into something that felt like a relationship, though neither of us said the word out loud. We spent nearly every day together. She started leaving her apartment more, started talking about maybe taking an online class, started looking less like someone barely surviving and more like someone learning to live again. And I fell completely, irrevocably in love with her. It wasn't the way I'd imagined falling in love would be. There were no grand gestures or dramatic declarations. It was in the small moments. The way she'd absently reach for my hand when we walked, the sound of her laugh when I made a terrible joke, the concentration on her face when she read, the way she'd look at me sometimes like I was the answer to a question she'd been asking her whole life. But underneath every beautiful moment was the constant, gnawing awareness that it was all built on a lie. I'd stopped going to the office, had called in sick for a week straight because I couldn't face Evelyn. She'd texted me twice asking for updates, and I'd sent back brief responses. She's doing better. Making progress. The second half of the payment had hit my account 3 days ago. $10,000 total for befriending her daughter. I'd stared at that number on my phone screen and wanted to vomit. It was a Saturday morning, and we were at Grace's apartment making breakfast together, when everything started to unravel. She was humming while she scrambled eggs, wearing one of my t-shirts, her hair messy from sleep. The domesticity of it all made my chest ache. "I'm thinking about calling my advisor," she said suddenly. "Professor Chin. Just to see if there's any possibility of returning to the program next semester." I froze in the middle of flipping a pancake. "Really? Yeah." She glanced at me, a shy smile on her face. "You've made me remember why I loved it in the first place. Why I wanted to spend my life studying stories and what they mean. I'm not saying I'm completely ready, but maybe I'm getting there." "Grace, that's amazing." She set down the spatula and came over to me, wrapping her arms around my waist. "It's because of you. You know that, right? You showed up and reminded me that life could be good again. That I could be good again." The words were like knives. I pulled her closer, burying my face in her hair, trying to memorize this moment before everything fell apart. "I love you," she whispered against my shoulder. "I know it's soon and maybe I shouldn't say it, but I love you, Holly. I need you to know that." Tears burned behind my eyes. "I love you too." And I did. God, I did. Which made what I was about to do so much worse. "Grace, I need to tell you something." I started, but her phone rang, cutting me off. She pulled back to look at the screen and frowned. "It's my mom. I should probably." She answered, stepping away. "Hey, Mom." I couldn't hear Evelyn's side of the conversation, but I watched Grace's expression shift from casual to confused to something that made my blood run cold. "What do you mean you need to discuss the arrangement?" Grace asked, her voice taking on an edge I'd never heard before. "What arrangement?" My heart stopped. "Mom, what are you talking about? Who's Holly?" A long pause. "She's right here." "She's where?" Another pause, and then Grace's face went completely white. "You paid her? To spend time with me?" The phone slipped from her hand and clattered to the floor. She turned to me slowly, and the look on her face broke something inside me that I knew would never heal. "Tell me she's wrong," Grace said, her voice shaking. "Tell me my mother didn't hire you to be my friend." I opened my mouth, but no words came out. The silence was answer enough. "Oh my God." She took a step back, then another, like she couldn't stand to be near me. "This whole time, everything, it was all because she paid you." "Grace, please let me explain." "Explain what?" Her voice cracked. "That you took money to pretend to care about me? That every conversation, every moment, every time you said you cared, it was all just you doing a job." "No," I said desperately. "It started that way, but it's not like that now. I love you, Grace. Everything I've felt, everything between us, that's real. I swear to you." "You swear?" She laughed, a terrible, broken sound. "You've been lying to me from the moment we met, and now you want me to believe you when you swear something? How stupid do you think I am?" "I never thought you were stupid. I just what? Just thought you could take my mother's money and play with my feelings, and I'd never find out." Tears were streaming down her face now. "I told you things, Holly. I trusted you. I let myself fall in love with you because I thought you chose me. I thought after everything that happened, after Sarah destroyed me, maybe I'd found someone who actually wanted to be with me for me. But you're worse than her. At least she pretended to love me without being paid for it." Each word was a blow. "Grace, please. Get out. Let me explain. Get out." She was sobbing now, her whole body shaking. "I can't look at you. I can't. I trusted you. I loved you. And you were just cashing a check." "It's not like that," I said, tears running down my own face. "I fell in love with you. That was never part of the plan. The money doesn't matter." "The money doesn't matter?" She looked at me with such pure disgust that I wanted to disappear. "Then why did you take it? If you really cared about me, why didn't you just tell me the truth?" I had no answer. Nothing that would make this better. Nothing that would fix what I'd broken. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "Grace, I'm so sorry." "Sorry doesn't change anything." She wiped her face roughly. "You need to leave. Now. And don't come back. Ever." I wanted to fight, to plead, to somehow make her understand. But I'd lost that right the moment I'd accepted Evelyn's offer. So I picked up my jacket and walked to the door, my vision blurred with tears. At the threshold, I turned back one more time. Grace was standing in the middle of her kitchen, arms wrapped around herself, looking smaller and more broken than she had the day I'd met her. And I'd done that. I'd made her trust again just to destroy her all over again. For what it's worth, I said quietly, loving you was the easiest thing I've ever done. She didn't respond, didn't even look at me. I left, and the sound of her sobs followed me all the way down the stairs. 3 days passed in a fog of misery. I called in sick to work again, ignored the texts from Evelyn demanding to know what had happened. I stayed in my apartment, couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't do anything but replay every moment with Grace and hate myself more with each memory. On the 4th day, I found myself standing outside her door at 2 a.m. I knew she was probably asleep. I knew she didn't want to see me. But I had to try one more time. Grace, I said softly, knowing she probably couldn't hear me through the door. I know you don't want to hear from me. I know I have no right to be here. But I need you to know something. I pressed my forehead against the door, tears streaming down my face. When your mom first offered me that money, I told myself it was just a job. Easy money to help someone who needed it. I convinced myself there was nothing wrong with that. My voice cracked. But from the first moment I met you, you started changing me. The way you saw the world, your intelligence, your humor, even when you were drowning in sadness. You made me want to be better. To do better. I took a shaky breath. I should have told you the truth immediately. I know that. But every day I spent with you, I fell more in love with you, and I became more terrified of losing you. So I kept lying, thinking I could protect what we had. But all I did was make everything worse. The hallway was silent except for my quiet sobs. You said I made you remember why you loved literature, why you wanted to study stories. You made me remember what it feels like to truly care about someone, to put their needs above everything else. You made me remember that life could be more than just surviving. And I'm so sorry that the way I showed you that was through a lie. I slid a folded piece of paper under her door, my hands shaking. I love you, Grace. Not because anyone paid me to. Not because I felt obligated. But because you're extraordinary, and knowing you has been the best thing that's ever happened to me. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know I've lost you forever. But I needed you to know that loving you was the only real thing in my life. I waited for a moment, hoping the door might open, knowing it wouldn't. Finally, I turned and walked away, leaving my heart behind in that hallway. When morning came, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. But I knew who it was. There's a bench by the pond in Riverside Park. The one near the oak tree. Be there at noon. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped my phone. She wanted to meet. I didn't know if it was to tell me off in person or to give me a chance to explain more fully, but I'd take whatever she was willing to give me. I arrived 15 minutes early and sat on the bench, my leg bouncing anxiously. When Grace finally appeared, walking slowly across the grass, I felt like I couldn't breathe. She looked exhausted, her eyes red-rimmed, her posture defeated. I'd done that to her. I'd broken her all over again. She sat down on the far end of the bench, as far from me as possible, while still being on the same piece of furniture. For a long time, neither of us spoke. I read your note, she finally said, her voice hoarse. About 50 times. Grace, let me talk, she interrupted. Please. I nodded, clenching my hands in my lap to keep from reaching for her. I've spent the last 3 days trying to figure out which parts were real and which parts were lies, she continued, staring at the pond. And the truth is, I don't think I'll ever really know. Maybe you did fall in love with me. Maybe everything after that first day was genuine. But it doesn't change the fact that you came into my life under false pretenses. It doesn't change the fact that when I was at my most vulnerable, when I was barely holding on, you saw an opportunity instead of a person. That's not fair, I said quietly. I saw you. I always saw you. Did you? She finally turned to look at me, and the pain in her eyes was devastating. Or did you see someone broken enough to need fixing? Someone desperate enough to believe that a stranger showing up at her door actually cared? Both, I admitted. At first, I saw what your mother saw. Someone struggling, someone who needed help. But Grace, it took maybe an hour before I started seeing you as more than that. Your wit, your intelligence, the way you could quote obscure poetry and make terrible puns in the same breath. I saw all of you, not just your pain. But you still lied. Yes. She looked away again. My ex, Sarah, she lied to me for 8 months. She was engaged to someone else the entire time we were together. And when I found out, when everything came crashing down, I swore I'd never let anyone fool me like that again. I'd never be that naive again. Her laugh was bitter. And then you came along, and I let myself believe that maybe I'd been wrong to close myself off. That maybe there were still good people in the world. What does it say about me that I fell for another lie? It says you're brave enough to keep trying, I said. It says you're stronger than you think. I don't feel strong. I feel like an idiot. We sat in silence, watching ducks glide across the pond. A jogger passed by. A mother pushed a stroller. Life continuing around us like the world hadn't just ended. I don't know if I can forgive you, Grace said eventually. I want to. Part of me really wants to believe that what we had was real, that the feelings were genuine even if the beginning was fake. But I don't know if I can ever trust you again. And what's a relationship without trust? My heart sank, but I forced myself to nod. I understand. But, she continued, and my head snapped up. I also don't know if I can just walk away. Because despite everything, despite the lies and the betrayal, you did help me. You did make me want to live again. And I don't think I can just pretend none of that happened. What are you saying? She finally looked at me fully, and there was something in her expression I couldn't quite read. I'm saying I need time. I'm saying I don't know what happens next. But I'm also saying that I'm here, talking to you, when every logical part of my brain says I should never speak to you again. So maybe there's hope for us. Or maybe this is just me being stupid again. You're not stupid, I said firmly. You're giving someone who doesn't deserve it a chance to prove they can be better. That's not stupid. That's incredibly generous. She stood up slowly. I'm going back to therapy. Real therapy, not whatever this was. And I think you should too. We both have things we need to work through. I will, I promised immediately. Whatever you need. I need honesty, she said. Complete, brutal honesty, even when it's uncomfortable. No more secrets, no more lies, no matter how small. If we're going to have any chance at this, that's the foundation we need. I promise, I said, standing to face her. No more lies. Ever. She studied me for a long moment. Then slowly she held out her hand. Not for a handshake, not for anything romantic, just a simple gesture of connection. I took it, fighting back tears. This doesn't mean everything's okay, she said quietly. This doesn't mean I forgive you, or that we're back together. This just means I'm willing to see if maybe, eventually, we could rebuild something real. Something that isn't built on money and lies. That's all I'm asking for, I whispered. A chance to prove that what I feel for you is real. She squeezed my hand once, then let go. I'll call you when I'm ready to talk again. It might be days. It might be weeks. But don't show up at my apartment. Don't try to rush this. Let me come to you. Okay. She turned to leave, then paused. Holly. Yeah. For what it's worth, I think part of me still loves you. I just don't know if that's enough. She walked away, and I stood there watching until she disappeared from view. It wasn't the ending I'd hoped for. But it wasn't the ending I'd feared either. It was something in between, something uncertain and fragile, and maybe, just maybe, salvageable. 2 weeks passed. Then 3. Grace didn't call, didn't text. I went back to work, faced Evelyn's cold fury when I transferred the full $10,000 back into her account. I don't want your money, I'd told her. I never should have taken it. She'd looked at me with something that might have been respect. My daughter is stronger than either of us gave her credit for. Maybe we both needed to learn that. I started therapy like I'd promised, working through my own issues with self-worth and why I'd thought selling pieces of myself was acceptable. It was hard, uncomfortable work, but necessary. And then, on a Tuesday afternoon exactly 23 days after our meeting in the park, my phone rang. Hi, Grace's voice said softly. Are you free? My heart leapt. Yes, always for you. There's a new bookstore that opened downtown. I thought maybe we could check it out together. No pressure, just two people looking at books. I smiled despite the tears in my eyes. I'd love that. Holly, she paused. Thank you for waiting. And for not giving up. Thank you for giving me a chance to prove I'm more than my worst mistake. When we met outside the bookstore an hour later, things were different. Careful, tentative, fragile. But when she smiled at me, really smiled, I saw possibility. Not a guarantee, not a promise that everything would work out, but possibility. And sometimes that's all love needs to grow. We walked into the bookstore side by side, not quite touching, but not quite separate either. And for the first time in weeks, I felt like maybe I could breathe again. Maybe the most beautiful love stories don't begin in perfect honesty. Maybe they begin in mistakes and misunderstandings and the messy work of choosing each other anyway. Of building something real from the ashes of something broken. I'd started this journey for all the wrong reasons. But somehow, impossibly, I'd found something worth fighting for. And I was going to spend every day proving that love built on truth, no matter how painful, was worth more than anything money could ever buy. I've learned that sometimes love finds us in the most unexpected ways. Sometimes the path to something real leads through mistakes and broken trust. But if both people are willing to fight for it, to choose honesty over comfort and truth over fear, maybe even the most complicated beginning can lead to a beautiful ending. Have you ever made a choice you regretted? One that almost cost you everything? Or maybe you've been in Grace's position, hurt but brave enough to give love another chance? If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more emotional love stories. Thank you for being here with me, and remember, love is always worth fighting for.